Okay, maybe we overlap a little bit tonight. I want to finish up just some investigation, discussion on this last section of verses, so we could read the Chinese again. And I'm really going to focus on the finishing up in the Shuntong and the powers, as they're called. So if everybody has it, 25, 26, 27, around there. It's the Hojian, Xin Jing Jing, Ji Jing, Hu Shi Deng, Yong Mei, that section?
25.
Huh?
25.
25, okay. So, Hojian, Xin Ji Jing, Ru Shi Deng, Yong Mei, Zhong Zhong, Shen Shen Tong, Shi Li Neng Hu Shi. Okay, so basically looking at this last line, because this is going into, with all kinds, it says, with all kinds of manifestations of spiritual penetrations. The one with 10 powers is able to be like this. What we described here earlier, trying to use language that conveys, yes, this is a pretty accomplished state, a bit out of the normal or the unusual as we're used to it, but this is not outside of the realm of the human. This is not leaving human potential and human accomplishment. It's just a higher expression of it. So in a sense, we could say it's the human mind-body at its highest state, of like a full-bore capacity unleashed. This comes from some we've been talking about, which is when consciousness is scattered, vijnana, through the six sense organs to the six sense objects. And there's a linking up of that, an attached linking. That's why it's called the six consciousness that go with it. The eyes, for example, see forms, but then there's a sticky link that's made between the object, which is the objects of sight, if you will, and the mental linking to that of attachment. This is called consciousness capture by confusion. The consciousness is actually captured by greed, anger, foolishness, and it's sort of a prisoner. In fact, the sutra says we're all of us prisoners within the triple realm of this limited consciousness. Desire realm, form realm, and even formless realm, these higher states of meditation, are all still within a prison of limited consciousness. So consciousness here, when a cultivator reaches this point, is reclaimed, is recovered fully. And in a sense, we okay?
The volume is
I'm too loud or the mic is too turned up?
Mic's not loud enough. Okay, turn up much louder now.
Is that better? Was it too soft or too loud?
It was too soft.
Oh,
People couldn't hear you online.
they could not hear it at all?
Yeah, it was very soft.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Sorry I woke you all up now. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Okay. So the gathering back of consciousness that's involved with cultivation, when it's completely gathered back from outflowing, the natural manifestation of this is manifestations of spiritual penetrations and 10, what are called 10 powers here. So you actually access a deeper, more profound potential that's still within human capacity. I want to keep stressing this rather than saying it's something that comes from outside. Rather, it's something that's liberated from within fully. This in the Avatamsaka is called the unattached, unbound, liberated mind. Unattached, unbound, liberated mind. The thing I want to do is talk about these powers and penetrations a little more. We talked about using penetration as an okay. I mean, some people think it's Chinglish or it's unnecessarily stilted direct translation, but we talked about why it could be seen as penetration, because with this full capacity, let's say the consciousness is reclaimed, restored, it's like an incredible, brilliant light that cuts through the fog that allows you to see 360 degrees for a long, long ways. So penetrating, I think, is really good. And the reason also is that it's penetrating what is already there. It's not imagining or creating something that isn't there. So again, this explains why sometimes people translate as psychic powers or supernatural, because with consciousness limited, these descriptions seem like they're beyond the natural. They're beyond the normal. But rather, from the, say, the Buddha's point of view, it's not beyond the normal, it's not beyond the natural. We have collapsed our consciousness to something lesser than reality. And so we don't see clearly, we don't hear clearly. It coming through distortions of attachments, of clingings, of klesha. And so penetration does work, because penetration indicates not that you entered another realm, but you see clearly what is there before your eyes. That's why often upon the awakening experience, my teacher with Master Shu Yun, supposedly they basically just said, thus it is. That's it. Thus. It's like that. There wasn't any more to say. Either you see it or you don't. But it's a scene rather than a reaching or a extraordinary power. Now, again, with the 10 powers, I want to come back to this, but these powers, that's an English translation. Actually, they're all called jhanas. J-N-A-N-A, jhana. Which really is better translated as knowledge of profound insight. When one has this knowledge or has this insight, it does confer what we might call power or ability. And it might be called the 10 abilities rather than the 10 powers then. So briefly, the 10 powers are a little bit different than the penetration. So that's why you see in the verse here, spiritual penetration, one who has the 10 powers. So generally, I'm not going to go into great detail tonight. I'm sure this has been lectured before, but you can also do your own research. The penetrations are usually talked about in terms of six shantong, and also 5 eyes. Literally, that's what the 5 eyes and the 6 penetrations. The eyes are basically a spiritual or, again, accomplished way of seeing. They aren't actually eyes in different parts of your head, but it's a metaphor to say that there is a perspicacity of insight that comes with this. That's why they're called the 5 eyes. These 6 spiritual penetrations basically are abilities that extend the normal human faculties, eye, ear, to be able to see beyond what we consider to be the ordinary again. They're able to see other realms of existence. Sometimes they're called heavenly eye, heavenly ear, and so forth. But they're able to know others' thoughts, which is another of the one of the 6 penetrations. And they're also able to allow the one who's activated these to do transformative skills, to move across time and space in ways that we don't normally think of, and even to penetrate solid objects. So now we're getting into something that, whoa, people are going, wait a minute, I was with you for a while there, but this is, okay, I'm just telling you, I'm reporting this. I'm not saying I can do this. I'm not saying I have this. I have rubbed up against people who do. And so from my own experience, I can say, this is pretty amazing, but it's not outside the human. Okay? And then the sixth one, remember, eyes, ears, the heavenly ear, the heavenly eye, knowing others' thoughts. This is a knowledge, that transformative ability, that's the fifth. And then freedom from outflows is the sixth, anashrava. That's the six penetrations. Now, I want to be clear about this because it came up this week during a retreat we were holding. For some reason, using the term outflow, in my training and learning in Buddhism, this is presented as a negative. It's a loss of essential energy that has to do resulting from thirst and ignorance. So uncontrolled desires and clear misunderstanding, even recklessness of thought, consequently leads to an expending or dissipating of your essential energy. This is that consciousness that flows out. And when there aren't outflows, that returns. There's a fullness. That's what this is talking about. So the power that comes, the freedom that comes from conquering this outflow is part of the penetration. And that conveys a lot of grace, a lot of insightful, powerful energy. See, the problem was, in the West now, flow has a general positive connotation. My friend and colleague at Berkeley, Mark Csikszentmihalyi, who I think was chair of the religious studies or East Asian group there, his father was a brilliant psychologist at the University of Chicago, and he came up with the idea, the construct of flow theory, that if you have a certain amount of concentration and drop yourself into an art or a discipline, you reach a point where you are almost freely merged with the discipline. You lose sense of time and space and whatnot. You're in the flow, it's called. And so generally if I say non-outflow, then people, oh, you're not in the flow anymore. So outflows are leaks, okay? It's like a leaky tire or a leaky vessel. It's not meant to convey the opposite of flowing energy. Now, if we wanted to convey that, we'd call that compassion, we'd call it kindness, we'd call it outpouring of metta or karuna or something. But unfortunately, flow then indicates this positive quality in current vernacular. I'm with the flow, I'm going with the flow. It's like really in groove and sync. But outflow here is generally one of the only translations. So ashrava also is called cankers, chains. You could call it barbed wire, that's a great one. Impediments, stain, defilements, and so forth. This is all, outflow is just one translation. And what's interesting, when you look at the other translations, they actually convey the range of psychological, emotional affect you have when you are outflowing in this way. In one way,
I'm still saying that the sound is not so great. Let me just move the mic up here.
Okay, sorry.
still not good.
They want it very close to you. Okay.
It's going to bite me if I put it any closer. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah. Is it turned the right
Yeah,
way?
you have to talk so we know.
I was just talking. I asked, is that better? That's talking, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, if we look at the language, and sometimes that's really good to do if you look up these terms technically, you'll see that the range of language indicates an intellectual effect, an emotional effect, a physical effect, a spiritual effect. The different words convey the range of that. So to call it chains and handcuffs is to convey the sense that it actually ties you up and restricts you. Like when you get angry, you actually are wrapped up in a chain that tightens you. And it actually tightens the capillaries and the flow of your energy. Very interesting. If you call it arrows, then it's the idea that you've been assaulted and you're in pain, and maybe it's a poisonous arrow. If you call it outflows, it indicates a dissipation or a loss of energy and vital chi, and so forth. And so if you call it taints or pollutions, then it indicates a kind of losing of your purity and a kind of being in a impure or muddy, murky, stagnant state. I really like the range of translations for ashrava. And outflow may only capture part of the meaning of this. So we'll sort of stop there. But it's not the gracious sharing, a compassionate outpouring. It's quite different. And one of the ways you mark that is compassionate giving, dana, compassionate response doesn't burn you out if it's really truly compassionate. Because compassion is, in fact, a manifestation of not outflowing. So, if you want to look into more of these 10 penetrations, there's actually actual chapter 28 of the Avatamsaka Sutra that's called the 10 penetrations. And it's a listing of the penetrations, the spiritual penetrations that bodhisattvas have. We'll get to that eventually. What are we on, chapter 9? Next week we'll get to chapter... I'm joking. This is going to take us a while to get to 28. Okay, is the sound all right?
They're hearing background noise now, so is the Yeti set to be more focused on Marty's?
That's a great metaphor.
Let's turn this around. Okay, try it now.
Is that better? 1, 2, 3. Hello?
Yeah, I think this is better.
Okay.
Okay, I apologize if I'm hurting your ears. So, if we look at just briefly, go into these 10 powers a little bit, and sometimes it's really good just to list them so you get a sense of what it's talking about, but I mentioned they're all called jhanas. They're not called like li, powers in Chinese. These are knowledges, if you will. And it's knowledge that is inseparable from the total experience of reality. So it's very different than sort of a specialized discipline knowledge, where you have a focus in an area, like a profession of an artist or a musician or a surgeon or a scholar in a field. This is all-encompassing. So you're seeing the full nature of how conditioned reality works, and you're not just seeing it through a straw. And it's also not knowledge like fact-holding encyclopedia knowledge. That's not what it is either, but it's a pure awareness that's free of all conceptual and emotional encumbrances. It also is free of any ego, what I would call ego-bending bias. Ego-bending bias. That's like, if you ever go to the sideshows of the carnival, you'll see these mirrors. One is bent this way and the other one's bent that way, and it gives you this really distorted. Our minds are sort of like mirrors, and the ego bends them and creates bias. And that's why these jhanas are contrasted with vijnana, because vijnana is divided knowing. It's partial knowing. It's broken up. This is complete. This is united knowledge. That's why it's called the total experience. Also, it has another meaning, which I find very interesting. It has something to do with kind of bun in Chinese, bun, original, fundamental, there from the beginning. And bun also can mean always present, never lost. So I tend to move away from basically there's not one thing where can dust alight from Shensho's verse. or some people say originally there's not one thing, where could dust delight. I think a better translation is all along. All along it's this way. Because originally sounds like it's coming from some beginning, like original Garden of Eden sort of thing, and before that. And fundamental has a kind of doctrinal tone to a fundamentalism. But I think ever and always so for Button is a better translation for this nature. And so this also means, this jhana means it's right there from the beginning. It's there intrinsic and inherent. I really like that. In other words, it's a knowledge that is potentially, we're sitting on it, we just haven't activated it. It's not a knowledge you have to go out and get. Very different approach. Some people translate it as also pure or pristine, meaning that it's untouched or unstained by the kleshas. This is another way of working with jhana. But if it is in fact, and that's why I like this, a knowledge that sees things as they truly are, and that is inherent and whole as part of the human potential, and not got from the outside, then the idea of learning by subtraction makes great sense. Because this is a learning not acquired by addition, adding to our stock of fact and data day by day, but removing the stains, the impediments, the encumbrances that prevent its full functioning. And that's why in this way they say learning in the Dharma is learning by subtraction, not addition. And the more you subtract of confused thinkings and attachments and klesha and so forth, the more this comes manifest completely. The sixth patriarch says it's like the bright sun that's always there, brilliant, shining, but the clouds and dust and whatnot below cover it over so we think it's not there. When the cloud and dust is gone, we see it for what it's always been. Same way with this knowledge, this jhana. So then you see, and this really becomes important, in self-cultivation, the most critical and central thing is working on your bad habits and faults and attachments. It's not working on questing for superpowers and super knowledges, or even questing for bodhi. The whole emphasis becomes then cleaning house, getting rid of that which stands in the way. In Taoyuan Ming's poem, returning, my garden is choked with rocks and weeds. I should get the rocks out, get the weeds out. This image of returning, of recovering, restoring, is really at the heart of learning by subtraction. And that's why you'll see, for example, Wei Nung, upon his realization of this, said, how unexpected, how unexpected. It was right here all along, holding complete within me. I did not need to look outside. This is the unexpected part. So we are so conditioned and programmed to be seeking, to be grasping, to going after. Even when we begin to spiritually cultivate, we just transfer the object of our obsession and desires into spiritual powers and penetrations. And that's why I think my teacher's commentary is really good on this. It's a very short line. He says, and what are the reasons that bodhisattvas attain these spiritual powers and penetrations? They attain them in order to expediently and cleverly teach and transform sentient beings, and to help all sentient beings bring forth the great Bodhi resolve, rather than to drift and wander in worldly confusion. I mean, this is just a beautiful, in other words, the powers come from a pure heart that wishes to help, to teach and transform and liberate. It's like a doctor who uses the X-ray, the CAT scan, the MRI, the blood paneling, and all of these powers, penetrating powers, not to lord over, but to cross over. So these powers come from actually part of a great compassionate wish, not a wish to have power. And in fact, the wish to have power is an outflow. A wish to seek for anything is an outflow. Okay, very important. Just a quick listing of these. These are the 10 powers and a kind of translation of them. The first one is a knowledge that's concerned with what is right and wrong and possible and what is impossible, that knowledge. It understands reality as it actually is, and then within that, how and what is possible and not possible. So impossible would be things that are outside the realm of reality, imaginary. But it also understands the exact underlying causes and conditions determining why things happen the way they do or do not. The second one is understanding the ripening or relations of cause and effect, of karma, past, present, and evolving. They actually understand how these relations undertaken in the past affect the present, how the present then affects the future, and so forth, with all their possibilities. The third one has to do with a knowledge that comes from understanding what are called the concentrations, liberations, the dhyanas, samadhis, and so forth. So it's understanding all of the states, the equilibrium, the afflictions, the purifications, the various abidings that are associated with meditative, contemplative practice. The fourth is knowing the moral faculties, either superior or inferior, of different beings. And this is really important because you can see, even in these knowledges that they're described, these are powers of teaching and transforming. If you don't understand the moral faculties, how can you then address the moral inadequacies and the moral needs of who you're working with? And it's also, it's very nuanced in the way that it's able to see how these moral faculties, either developed or undeveloped, then lead to different kinds of personalities, ignoble and noble, and how sometimes they go back and forth, and how sometimes they're actually interlinked and mingling in the same person. So it's very interesting. It might suggest that we're not purely ignoble and we're not purely noble, but we're a mix. And understanding that balance and how to work with it is really partly what this fourth power is about. It also then understands how, if we allow our moral compass to get off, we will then lean or tend to immoral, bad friends, bad situations. If the compass is trued, and I like the word trued, like you true to a bicycle tire, all the spokes are in balance. If it's trued, then we tend to mix with the good. And so this understanding, this psychological understanding of the moral capacities and the moral compass, really an important power. It also then goes, knowing this, the fifth power has to do with knowing the various aspirations and motivations of living beings. The sixth one is understanding the different inclinations, which is different than the motivations. Aspirations and motivations are one thing, inclinations are another. How are we inclined? This is really important if you're going to be a teacher. In a way, it's sort of like, you could say with different tastes, there's 5 different flavors or tastes. Some people are inclined to the sour, the sweet, the bitter. So if somebody's inclined towards the sweet, if you give them the bitter, you're not exactly tying up affinities with them. But that doesn't mean you inundate them with the sweet either. You just have to figure out, here's their inclination. I work with their inclination, but I don't submit and yield to it. This is a skillful teacher. Nor do I hit it over the head and try to destroy it. Give up all things that you like. You work, but you have to understand how those work. This is also sometimes called understanding the acquired dispositions of different beings. Accumulated habit patterns, characteristics that arise from their attachments. Number 7 is knowing where the paths that lead to the different destinies. Basically, sometimes say knowing where all paths lead. You want to read a very short, kind of really pithy piece on this. My teachers, the 10 Dharma realms are not beyond a single thought. It basically says certain thoughts lead to certain destinies in the 10 Dharma realms. These thoughts lead to the hells, these become animals, these lead to ghosts, these lead to devas and gods, these lead to pupil, asuras, bodhisattvas, and buddhas. So it's basically showing where paths lead. And the paths are basically created and sustained not a priori out there, but with our thoughts and our emotions and our actions. That's why in the Earth Story Sutra it's really cool, because it says there are hells, but these are not fixed abodes. They arise from people's karma. They're constantly being created. And as we create new forms of karma, new hells correspondingly appear. So the hell matches the thought, the consciousness, the activity. The texts don't talk about sort of a hell for genetically modified killers. Okay? The ancient texts don't say if you genetically modify a human being to become a killer who has no will anymore, it's like robotic. That wasn't thought of. But now we can do things like that. But that doesn't mean there's no hell corresponding to the retribution for doing that. A new one will come about. And you can use your imagination to some degree to imagine what that would be like. So, number 8 is also the knowledge or being able to recollect former, they say, abodes or past existences. So the Tathagata who has this state can know the manifold past lives that he or she has gone through. 1 birth, 2, 10, hundreds of thousands of births during the different times that the world is and the worlds they're in. And that's why you'll see sometimes part of this knowledge was almost, what do I say, there I was that person in that clan. I looked this way. This is what I ate. This is what I was surrounded by. These are my pleasures and pain. I lived for so long, and passing from there, I appeared elsewhere. And in that realm, da-da-da-da-da. It's sort of like the family album, but it's going really, really far back and so forth. Number 9 is knowing death and rebirth. And this has to do with basically not just knowing these lives, but also knowing how the human cycle, fortunate, unfortunate, good rebirth, unfortunate rebirth, the places of the death and rebirth of beings. This is part of that knowledge. So again, this is presented as something that is understandable, that one can see only with this kind of mind that's totally purified. You can look at somebody who comes in now. If you're a sensitive person, you could say, I kind of see where they're coming from. They've had a rough life, or they've had a privileged life. The way they carry themselves, their complexion, the way they speak, educated, not educated, the way their eyes dart around, if they're self-secured and satisfied, or if they're hungry and on edge. We know this, we use this all the time to evaluate people. If you were to expand that and develop that, you'd be able to see what this is describing, their past births, where they're coming from, how this has been a continuous chain of something and so forth. And you'd also be able to see where it's leaning, where it's tending. And therefore, as a physician, doctor, good knowing advisor, you can skillfully intervene and cause them to have changes of heart and mind that redirect their destinies. You don't do it for them. That's not possible. That's why it says no one does this but yourselves. Buddhas only show the way. But they can show the way because they can go into that fine-tuning thing and say, the reason why you're suffering is because of your lust. You have insatiable lust, and they can hit the nail right on the head. That's not true of everybody. For another person, it's going to be arrogance. For another person, it's going to be fear. Another person, it's going to be feelings of inadequacy. But knowing how the inclinations, the motivations, the dispositions, and knowing where they're birthed and so forth, this can become very customized, very precise, strategically aimed. And that's the difference. For example, as we move, say, in the realm of science, right now we hit cancers with chemotherapy or radiation. We just blah. But if you can get into the newer stuff like gene therapy, you're doing a very precise thing. You're going to that one gene where that is occurring. I'm not saying this is the same. I'm saying I'm giving it as a metaphor. so that the treatment becomes much more precise, does less harm to all the other existing organs and so forth, and maybe actually gets at something more root rather than symptomatic. So this is what these powers, but again, go back to my teacher's thing, the reason they have them, the reason they develop them, is that it allows them to do this teaching and transforming. And then finally, the 10th power is the exhaustion of klesha, the exhaustion of what's called the defilements. And they realize this for themselves here and now. And then, in that sort of taintless, pure state, they're able to really turn the Dharma wheel. Okay. Any questions on that? I'll just take a pause here. How's the sound? Is it a little better?
Yeah, very good.
We're penetrating. Excuse me, I'm just going to drink a little. Yes, go ahead.
I have a question. Basically, I have a sense of it, but
I'm going to...
you can hear me? Okay.
There.
Yeah. So, I have a question about the relationship between not seeking and the pure compassion for living beings. I have a sense of it, but sometimes I kind of, the compassion, sometimes I lose the discernment of this truly selfless compassion. Sometimes the compassion got mixed up with some kind of a self-seeking. So wondering whether is there any skillful means or any how to frame this so that I can kind of a check on myself.
So if I understand, you're asking a question about how compassion, sometimes your expression of compassion isn't always pure. It gets mixed up with seeking. Yeah.
Because you talk about a problem of really the conversations about not seeking and then working on personal thoughts and habits. But at the same time, you're also trying to connect with.
No. See, you're not trying to connect.
Not trying.
See, this is the effort. This is, in one sense, this is wu wei, not doing. But not doing doesn't mean you don't do anything. It just says you don't try to do it. Why do you not try to do it? Why do you try not to connect? Because you're already connected. Trying to connect is adding a head on top of a head. Compassion, being one with everyone, is a wisdom insight. Compassion is the expression of that wisdom. I am, in fact, interwoven, interconnected with all beings and all worlds. There is no isolated monad self. Okay? Once that awakening happens, and it's visceral, it's not just a head trip, then compassion is the natural expression. You cannot be but anything but compassion, and you don't have to try to connect because you are connected. Then it's a whole different thing. That's why it's not exhausting. It's no more exhausting to say, I need to connect with my sore finger. What? It's your finger. You're connected to it. You know it's sore. You know, I need to connect with that thorn that's in my leg. No. Your body is a connected realm, and you're very aware of it. Slightest breeze, slightest little, the whole thing registers. What a bodhisattva is the whole realm of beings. That's why they say, tong ti da bei, single substance, great compassion, single body. This is, to us, unimaginable because we have this dualistic frame. We have our self, ego, and then out there. But when that stops, and it doesn't stop through trying to connect, it stops because you see through it. And after that, everything's different. Once you see this is a false dichotomy, and you really see it, compassion is a natural expression of this. You cannot help but be compassionate. And if you think about this, therefore you're able to feel and understand other beings. These powers that are being expressed are really the natural extension of just this open connectivity that's there all the time. We just shut it down. Make sense?
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
What?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Let's wait till later. Yeah, because I want to try to see if I can move on to the text here. So, I'm going to just do a large section here because this is a more or less a refrain. So it says, at that time, light passed through 100 worlds, and everywhere illumined 1,000 worlds in the east. It was also like this in the south, the west, the north, the 4 intermediate directions, as well as above and below. In other words, everywhere. Within each of these worlds, there were 1 billion Jambudvipas, reaching up to 1 billion ultimate form heavens. Probably that should be capitalized because that's a technical. So ultimate form heaven is, in fact, a designated realm. All of these were clearly revealed in this light. And just as in this place one could see the thus come one seated on his lotus flower treasury lion's throne, with bodhisattvas as many as 5 motes of dust and 10 Buddha lands circumambulating him, so too in each of those billions of Jambudvipas, there were billions of thus come ones seated in the same way. And because of the spiritual power of the Buddha, in each of these 10 directions there was a great bodhisattva, accompanied by bodhisattvas to the number of 5 motes of dust and 10 Buddha lands, who came to the Buddha's place. Their names were Manjushri and others. They came from countries called Golden-Colored World and others, and the Buddhas they served were called Unmoving Wisdom, Thus Come One, and others. And at that time, in the presence of all those Buddhas, the voices of Manjushri Bodhisattvas, plural, in all those places, rang out in unison as they spoke these verses. So this is the intersection of text between reminding us again of this great assembly, reminding us that there's an incredible light being released that reveals this and shows this, and within that light, one sees this other reality than we normally see, which is Buddhas and Bodhisattvas in numbers of 5 motes of dust, teaching and listening and transforming and being in this energized state of doing the Buddha's work. Some of this, you could take it at one level and just say, hey, this is kind of blowing my mind. It's like, good. That's kind of what it's meant to do, because the mind of limited consciousness needs to be expanded, and sometimes we talk about it as exploding it a little bit, stretching it a little bit. With these numbers, with these Manjushris, with the motes of dust and da-da-da-da-da, you can't calculate this. You can't calculate this. And so the unable to calculate it can trigger a letting go of the calculating mind that wants to grasp and calculate. So partly you could say, wait, slow down, you're going too fast. But partly it's say, hurry up, get going, let go. You know, you don't have to be so controlled and measure everything out. Relax a little bit and let your heart and your mind settle into or relax into taking a ride in a dimension and in a quality of consciousness that isn't our ordinary attached sparrow fart thinking. Okay? So that's partly how you can read this. Now, those who have penetrations and have developed the fullness of consciousness say this is not metaphor, it's not allegory. This is how it is. I can't affirm that, but I'm careful not to deny it either, because I can't affirm it. Because deny it when I don't know it is equally as foolish as affirming it when I don't know it directly. So all I say is the mind wanders, W-O-N-D-E-R, and I will keep cultivating myself to the point that maybe I'll have enough data to confirm this directly. But I think at this point it's really important in one's cultivation not to be overwhelmed by these things, but let them work in gentle ways on consciousness, perhaps planting seeds. I was going to do more, but I just wanted to read one section, playful, because I took this to Maine, and I was getting ready for tonight's class, and then I saw it sitting there on my floor, and of course I got a little flower. And while I was reading this is the Zhuangzi. When I was reading the Zhuangzi down on the dock with my dog, the dog, as far as I know, wasn't reading the Zhuangzi, but maybe understands the Zhuangzi better than I do. A bird flew over, and this feather came down and just landed at the place I was reading. So that being the case, I want to read this section to you tonight in a playful kind of way. And the reason why I'm going to read this is just relax and say, Marty's reading a kind of bedtime story here from the Zhuangzi, but also because it emphasizes with the penetrations and powers, there are lots of things that we don't see that are actually here. There's a lot of things we don't hear that are actually around us all the time. There's a lot of things we don't smell or taste that are around us all the time. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue. There's a lot of things we don't feel that are putting out vibrations and waves, but we're not picking up on it. And of course, there's a lot of things we think and imagine, dharmas, that either are imagined completely or not at all accurate, and that we can't even get beyond the limited compass of our frame. So this idea is not limited to Buddhism, that the famous line from Shakespeare's Hamlet, there are more things to heaven and earth than are found in your philosophy or natural science, Horatio, when he says the ghost of his father appeared to him. And he said, no, that's not possible. And he said, there's more things to heaven and earth than imagined in your philosophy. So this is a Zhuangzi part. I'll just read it tonight and you can relax. Maybe we'll go a little over because I think Jin Chuan's going to talk tonight, I hope. Yeah. Okay, so this is the beginning of the Zhuangzi. In the northern darkness, there is a fish, and his name is Kun. And Kun is so huge, I don't know how thousand miles he measures. He changes and becomes a bird, whose name is Peng. The back of the Peng measures, I don't know how many thousands of miles across, and when it rises up and flies off, his wings are like clouds all over the sky. And when the seas begin to move, this bird sets off for the southern darkness, which is called the Lake of Heaven. The Universal Harmony records various wonders, and it says, when Peng journeys to the southern darkness, the waters are roiled for 3,000 miles. He beats the whirlwind and rises 90,000 miles, setting off the 6-month gale. Wavering heat, bits of dust, living things blowing each other about. The sky looks very blue. Is that its real color? Or is it because it's so far away and has no end? When the bird looks down, all he sees is blue too. If water is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up a big boat. Pour a cup of water into a hollow in the floor, and bits of trash will sail on it like boats. But set a cup there, and it will stick fast, for water is too shallow, and the boat too large. If wind is not piled up deep enough, it won't have the strength to bear up greater wings. Therefore, when the Peng rises 90,000 li miles, he must have the wind under him like that to raise him up. Only then can he mount on the back of the wind, shoulder the blue sky, and nothing can hinder or block him. Only then can he set his eyes to the south. No, it goes on. The little cicada, it's like a grasshopper, right? And the little dove laugh at this saying. They laugh at what they just heard. Pah! When we make an effort and fly up, we can't get as far as the elm tree or the sapwood tree over there. But sometimes we don't even make it and we just fall down on the ground. Now, how is anyone going to go 90,000 miles to the south? If you go off to the green woods nearby, you can take along food for 3 meals and come back with your stomach as full as ever. If you're going 100 miles, you must grind your grain the night before. And if you're going 1,000 miles, you must start getting provisions together 3 months in advance. What do these creatures understand? Says the Zhuangzi. Little understanding cannot come up to great understanding. The short-lived cannot come up to the long-lived. How can I know that this is so? The morning mushroom knows nothing of the twilight and dawn. The summer cicada knows nothing of spring and autumn. They are short-lived. South of Chu, there's a caterpillar which counts 500 years as one spring and 500 years as one autumn. Long, long ago, there was a great rose of Sharon that counted 8,000 years as one spring and 8,000 years as one autumn. they are long-lived. And then they mentions this Pengzu alone is famous today for lived a long time, and everybody tries to ape him. Isn't it pitiful? Among the questions we have here, we find the same thing. In the bald and barren north, there's a dark sea. In it, a fish which 7,000 miles across, no one knows how long, and this fish is called kun, also a bird named Peng, and they say this is verified in other sources, beats the whirlwind, and so on and so forth. And then there's a little quail sitting listening to this story, and the little quail laughs at him saying, "Where does he think he's going? I give a great leap and I fly up, and I never get more than 10 or 12 yards before I come down fluttering among the weeds and the brambles. And that's the best kind of flying anyway. Where does he think he's going, this big Peng bird?" Such is the difference between big and little. So this is the passage I want to read you from the Zhuangzi. I'm going to have another passage next week because I really like this book. But what I'm trying to get at here is when we hear of the section of text we just read, and we hear of the powers and the penetrations, our tendency is like, what is he talking about? How can that be? And what Zhuangzi is suggesting is the capacity of our minds, although great, hasn't been fully greatened. And therefore, we're too small in our compass and can't grasp this. So, I'll pause there. It's still COVID, Jinchuan, so people aren't going out and partying tonight.
Yeah.
So if we go a few minutes over.
No partying.
Right, and the good thing about it is that since I can't see anybody, if they're frowning and shaking their heads, I can't see it.
We have a new saying in the monastery. Somebody said, this word meetings, I don't really like the word meetings. Can we just call all the times we meet parties? Okay, we're gonna have a Dharma party now.
Dharma parties, no meetings?
Yeah, no meetings. He said, actually, after our meetings, I'm actually pretty happy. Before I used to work in the world and all the meetings were miserable. So
It's a fifth vow, right? Meetings are endless, I vow to
Yeah.
attend them all.
Parties are endless, yeah. So the video camera working, Lock?
Yeah, we're using the middle.
Middle one? Okay.
It's almost not working.
Okay, let me turn the sound so it's. What I was thinking of sharing today was about the bowing contemplative exercise immersion we just had. We just had a retreat at DRBU for 4 days, and Marty helped lead it. And in the spirit of what Marty was talking about today, about expanding our vision, after the retreat, I had a chance to, just sit down with Jing Weisher and just discuss what happened. We found it's a really interesting exercise just to sit down and say, what did you see? Because we each see different things. And on the car ride back down with the 4 men at the River Vihara retreat, we did the same exercise. We just went around and asked, what did you see? What happened? Any insights? Anything you saw from people around us? And so I was just going to share. I was just going to share a couple of reflections. This is by no means exhaustive, but what I found that when we go around and just listen to what other people see, it expands our own vision. It's a really wholesome exercise because sometimes we just see what we see and then we think that's all that happened, and then we hear somebody else and go, wow, that happened? I was there too. I was there too. And so one reflection actually came from Jing Weisher, that he said, actually, this bowing siya was very important. And actually connected to those 10 powers we just talked about tonight, about being able to meet living beings at their inclinations and their motivations. So for many of these DRBU students, they may be meeting bowing for the first time. Maybe not even Buddhist. They're just coming, trusting, wanting to learn wisdom. He said, can you imagine now when they see monastics bowing in the Buddha hall, they don't see it as some kind of religious experience far away, but something like, I can do this wholeheartedly. I know how I can practice this. And I reflect back, it's interesting. Through the whole bowing CEI, I don't think we formally bowed to the quote-unquote external Buddha, the Buddha image. We did 3 bows on the beginning of the ceremony, beginning of the practice sometimes, but it wasn't done, like, let's all bow to the Buddha now. It was, okay, we're doing bows in the spirit of the bowing retreat. And so, when Marty was explaining this this practice, actually another of the Buddha Vihara participants felt, I really felt Marty was sharing his 40 years of experience with us, the fruits of his cultivation over all these years, and giving it kind of the essential practices that he's learned in a very accessible way. And so what Marty broke it down to was 3 steps, using the 3 steps, 1 bow as a framework. The first 3 steps was a spirit of returning. I take refuge with the Buddha of my essential nature. I take refuge with the Dharma of my essential nature. I take refuge with the Sangha of my essential nature. And then as we're bowing down, there's a repentance. We use the repentance verse for all the harmful things I've done with body, speech, and mind. And it goes on. And finally, there's standing up and recite Namo Guan Shi Yin Pusa. And the Spirit's reconnect. Or as Marty just talked about tonight, we're already connected. We just discover, or we could say we live into that connection fully. We don't deny that. And just given the time, I won't kind of speak about that more, but maybe in the future sessions, I think Marty could share some of the reflections he gave during the retreat. I was very touched in the final sharing when we ran around the room for all the participants. Many of the DRBU students felt this was one of the best retreats they've had at DRBU. And one student in particular, who was not a Buddhist, who has gone through tremendous suffering over these last 3 or 4 years because of the fires, he said that he actually lost 2 homes in the last, I think, 3 or 4 years because of the fires in California. And so he lost 1 home, and that's traumatic. He moved in with his parent, his father, and that house burned down too. So his childhood home also burned down. And he said he felt just homeless, lost, anxious. And he said people would try to advise him, saying, home is everywhere. Home is where you are at. And he said it didn't work, it didn't help. And he's thought about it a lot. But he said in this bowing CEI, he said, I didn't use what Marty taught, at least the phrases. He said, all I did when I took the 3 steps, I said, thank you. As I bowed down, I'm sorry. Standing up, I'm coming home. And he said, honestly, I don't know what home is, but somehow I feel closer. And I was like, wow. Because I felt that person captured the kind of spirit behind those 3, you could say, steps, right? The sense of returning, right? The sense of gratitude, thank you. Recognizing all that we've been given. And then the repentance, so simple. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the harm I've done, the things I've, regret. I'm sorry. I take responsibility. And finally, standing up, I'm coming home. Coming home to, you could say, I can imagine what that might be, but here what we just talked about, the Avatamsaka Sutra, this interconnected web of human awareness, or not human awareness, this sentience that we're part of. And so I just thought that was a very beautiful kind of encapsulation of the CEI. From someone who's not Buddhist, who's probably, I don't think has really bowed before, and there's this seed now in that person's consciousness that gives them, you could say, a way home. A way home.
Mhm.
So, anyway, just some reflections from this time CEI.
Wow, that's really something.
Okay, we want to, anything else or just announcements?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
So, announcements would be,
I will
Yeah.
say that it was moving for me to see, we had 65, 70 people
yeah,
bowing inside and outside. And the bowing outside continues to be a powerful connecting thing, because the natural world is so in danger right now from our harmful actions of body, speech, and mind, that the actual story you just told of thank you to the natural world for all it gives us. I'm sorry for all the messing up, the extinction of species and pollution I'm causing, and then this positive energy, and I'm going home, which is I'm going to reconnect and restore. That impulse in the natural world, I think, is exactly the change of heart we need to make this thing go. It's not going to be solved by little technological gadgets and things like this. It's going to be, and that somebody who's not Buddhist can intuitively, viscerally absorb that kind of energy. That's really remarkable. I mean, the capacity of the human, I think, has, for goodness and wisdom, was restored in me by seeing so many they're all younger than me, out there doing this bowing. So yeah, I'm very grateful. It was restorative for me, even though I'm tired, to see this happening in the world today. You know, I'm sorry to say this, but there's not many people who say I'm sorry anymore. There's very few people who admit they make mistakes. I'm sorry that you feel this way about it. I'm sorry that you feel this way. But I don't say, I'm sorry for what I did. I'm sorry that you took it right. You know, that's the most you hear in terms of sorry. I'm sorry that. But sorry for? Very hard. Very hard to see anybody admit a mistake and then cleanse. And it's such a powerful, transformative thing to do. I can remember when my father would say something to me, he said, "Son, I'm sorry. That was my fault." Whoa. That just softened me and opened up all kinds of possibilities that weren't there if he had just, covered it up and played hard steel. So this is a very powerful, yeah. I won't say more.
so. In terms of announcements, we have our daily schedule. We're going to be starting from Road Vihara tomorrow, so we won't be having our regular Dharma reflection in the morning. We'll begin on Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday from Road Vihara. Other than that, I think just the regular schedule. Okay? Anything else you wish her? The meeting up?
Yeah, tomorrow I'm sure we have
Yeah, a sutra lecture, like the regular schedule.
Okay.
We are thinking actually, Marty, to put the Wi-Fi to the forest that people can see and bow with us in the redwoods.
Oh, that'd be very cool.
This is, if someone never have a chance, highly recommend it.
Well, there's this concept called forest bathing. Do you know what that?
Yeah, I think I heard it before.
Yeah, so people go out in nature,
Uh-huh.
into the woods, and they just hang out. This is some new thing. I've been doing it for my life. But anyhow, they go there and they bathe in the energy of the forest. It's like a cleansing. So we just have forest bowing.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I can share a little bit our
Yeah.
discoveries next time about bowing in the forest. because
Yeah,
it's
no,
quite powerful.
Very powerful.
Wow.
Very
it's
powerful.
Highly recommended.
Cool.
Okay.
May every living being, our minds as one and radiant with light, share the fruits of peace
hearts of goodness, luminous and bright. If people hear and see how hands and hearts can find in giving unity, may our minds awake to great compassion, wisdom, and to joy. May kindness find reward. May all who sorrow leave their grief and pain. May this boundless light dispel the darkness of our endless night. Because our hearts are one, this world of pain turns into paradise. May all become compassionate and wise. May all become compassionate and wise. Bow in respect to the three jewels.